Hello, and welcome to the Write Anyway podcast from Pages and Platforms and the Happily Ever Author Club. In today's episode, Rochelle talks with noted memoirist and teacher Laura Davis about the value of the writing retreat. Laura is the author of 6 groundbreaking nonfiction books, including mega bestseller The Courage to Heal for women survivors of child sexual abuse, and her recent mother-daughter memoir, The Burning Light of Two Stars. Her passion, aside from writing, is building writing communities where people can find their voice and hone their craft. Hello, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. Off camera, we were just saying really quickly, I just do not like being on camera. So
What's not my favorite
yeah,
thing?
it's not mine. So thank you so much for being here and being willing
Uh,
to come on and talk. Today, we're going to talk about the value of writing retreats or what one can expect from writing retreats. Should you go on a writing retreat? Wherever this conversation leads,
okay.
that would be awesome because I feel like you're the expert on writing retreats. I've been to one of your retreats and I have to say, probably changed my life. It was really profound, and I know that other people in the retreat said very similar things. So I'd love to get your take. What's the value of going to a retreat?
Well, it's a big question, but I think that the first value of any retreat, whether it's a writing retreat, a meditation retreat, a yoga retreat, is that it is a retreat. It's stepping out of your routine, it's stepping out of your daily life, your daily obligations, your daily habits. And retreats are often in a beautiful place. So at least the retreats I lead, I like to have them often in a beautiful place, although I've done them online as well. But the idea is that you get to step out of your life and deeply immerse yourself in something else. So for me, it's writing because I'm a writing teacher. So you deeply immerse yourself in writing. And because you are not dealing with all the contingencies of your daily life, you get to sink in at a very deep level and become immersed. And when you're immersed, a lot of other things that trip you up get out of the way, and you're able to have a much deeper experience, primarily with yourself. The other thing I love, I mean, there are self retreats, like when I was working on my memoir, Burning Light of Two Stars. I found it really hard to do the deep work just at home in the routine of my days. And so, fairly often, maybe 4 times a year, I would take myself to a monastery in Big Sur and I would just book it for like 3 or 4 days. And I would be in some little funky trailer eating actually bad food. They served you food, but it was like really minimalistic. But I didn't care. I was there just to work on my book. And I could work on my own rhythm. If that meant at 3 in the morning, I could do it at 3 in the morning. And I got such incredibly huge progress and huge breakthroughs on writing my book from taking that so that's like a self retreat. So that's one way to have a writing retreat. And I've used it myself to great advantage, as have many of my students. And then there's retreats with other people or with a teacher. And there's different types of writing retreats. I've taught ones that are what I call a work weekend, where people come, they have a project they're working on, and they spend many hours every day immersed in that project. And they could be at different phases. Someone could be writing a book proposal. Someone else could arrive with 2 cases of journals from 30 years ago that they want to read, and they don't really know what they're doing with them. Someone else they have a shitty first draft and they're going to read their whole manuscript and really get that kind of 30,000-foot view of what they have and what they don't have without editing along the way. Someone else might be about to publish a book and they're looking at their page proofs. And someone else might be writing something that's like a family history for their children and grandchildren. So, along that whole continuum, people come, they have a project they're working on, and basically what I do is I create the conditions where people can focus very deeply, if either in person or sometimes I've done these digitally so that people learn to focus and concentrate even at home. And then we meet several times a day. People have little individual meetings with me, little coaching sessions, and then we'll meet a couple times a day. People come and they share little bits of work or a dilemma or a problem, and I will work with them and everybody else is able to witness and listen in a little fishbowl. And then in the evenings, people take turns reading their work and getting some feedback from the group. And it's a very simple structure, and people get so much, they have so many breakthroughs and they get so much done. So that's another type of writing retreat that's more focused on working on a particular project. And the other ones, the ones I really love the most, are like the ones you came to, where it will be a residential retreat. I like to teach for a week if possible, 5 or 6 days, 6 or 7 days. And there'll be a theme. Could be, I've done a lot of retreats dealing with grief, or I've done it on building resilience in a time of uncertainty. That was one I taught last fall. I just last week taught one called Flourishing as We Age. And I made that one women only because I decided that a lot of women are not going to talk about their bodies and the changes in their bodies if men are in the room. So it was a women only retreat. Mine, they aren't all that way. And it was like 25 people from 57 to 93, 91, I think. And this cross generational conversation was just phenomenal. And what I love in those settings is the connections people make with each other. And although I am a writing teacher and the vehicle we're using is writing, what I think my core deepest skill is group facilitation and creating an environment that feels incredibly safe, nurturing, and confidential, where people can do very deep work that's very supported. And writing is the tool. And I love watching people, they come in the first day and they're wary and they're like, I don't know, why did I come to this thing? And a lot of hesitation and kind of fear. And then the last day, they're just beaming, and the love in the room is palpable because when people become vulnerable and are witnessed by each other in a safe environment and really work deeply on their issues, their fears, their grief, their joy, their not knowing what their next direction is, there's just a feeling of incredible lift at the end. And I think people go home with greater clarity, more grounded, more resilient, and so I love that. And what I love the most is people will say to me, I'm still meeting with the small group that I met at your retreat, and it's
Right.
5 years later, and we're still getting
Yeah.
together. So I love connecting people with each other almost more than anything else, more than teaching someone this is the best sentence to use to start your memoir, or why don't you change the inciting incident here. I mean, I can teach those things, but what I really love is the intimacy and community that gets built at a well structured, well run
Yeah.
writing retreat.
So we've talked so far about three different kinds of writing retreats. The second one was group with some, maybe you're going to meet one-on-one with somebody, you're going to do some group
Mhm.
share if people want to. How is this third one you just talked about different? What are some of the things that, when you say group facilitation, what does that mean?
To run a retreat well, I plan a lot. So I teach a lot with a friend of mine, Evelyn Hall, and she brings like a different quality that I bring all the structure. I'm the writer, and I'm like the head of the retreat, like this part. And Evelyn is like all heart. She brings in dancing music. She brings in an altar. She brings in the spiritual component. She brings in just a huge open heart. And I think we're a really good balance for each other. Yeah, the difference is like the first thing I was describing, that work weekend. It's for people who are actually, their goal is to publish something or their goal is to complete a particular project and they want feedback on their work. That's why they're there. So it's all about the writing. And I think this other kind of retreat, the ones that are focused on grief, aging, resilience, or just general writing retreat, I've done all kinds of topics over the years. It's much more focused on the process, and it's really writing as a tool for self-discovery, writing as a tool for healing, writing as a tool for transformation. And so at those retreats, there's no feedback. We're not listening to someone and saying, "Oh, if you change this story this way, it would be more effective." So it's really more of an experience of writing from a deep place and being witnessed and heard, but not having the work critiqued. And there are a lot of people come to those retreats who don't necessarily define themselves as writers, but they like to write. So maybe they write in journals, or they're writing as a tool that they use in their life for coping, for self exploration, for self knowledge, for venting, for accusing, for informing, educating. They're word people, but publishing is not what they're interested in. I mean, people who want to publish can come too, but the purpose of that retreat is not to further their book, it's to further their life. So that's another kind. And the other kind that I really love so much, it's something I started doing when my daughter, who's now 28, she was 15. So this is like 13 years ago, and she was going to graduate high school early. She was our youngest. And when I started seeing the empty nest ahead of me, I decided I wanted to also teach writing retreats in other places around the world. And the first one I did was in Bali. And I'm going back to Bali in August. It'll be my 11th time taking
Wow.
people there. So obviously, I really love it there. And these trips combine adventure travel, usually staying in really small boutique hotels, really kind of off the beaten path tourism with a certain amount of, there's usually like hiking or snorkeling, or they're active, physically active. And then there's usually art, seeing art and music, and like the Bali trip is called Backroads of Bali. Like you're not going to the main tourist sites. And so it combines touring and really getting to know a country or a region with writing. And the writing is a smaller component here. Like the other retreats, like the one you attended, we would write for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours at night. You'd be in a little group that wrote for another hour. It's like writing and then resting or hiking or walking. But on these retreats, the writing might be a couple of hours a day, and the rest of the day you're doing other things. I teach people a little bit about travel writing so they can record their experience, but it's also a way to ground and to bond with the other travelers. And I think there's something wonderful about a creative vacation that sets it apart from just typical tourism. There's something about doing something creative every day that creates bonds. You pay more attention, get people much more tuned into the sensory details of what they're experiencing every day. And then you have a written record of your travels. So I've done this in a lot of places, Bali a bunch of times, and this year and last year I added a component of visiting Balinese healers because our guide is very in the world of Balinese spirituality and healers. So we're visiting healers and studying spirituality, and that's kind of the theme of the trip. And then we're writing a little bit. And I've gone to Spain, Tuscany, Greece, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Peru a couple of times. I'm sure I'm missing a couple places. And that the other one I did, which was another kind of creative thing, is when I was in Peru, my wife is a yoga teacher, and sometimes she goes on these trips with me and teaches yoga. And so she really liked Peru, so she went with me. And I always take these trips, and I always will hire like a tour company to do the logistics because I don't know these countries. So I'll get someone else who will do all the hotels and the transit. And so it's really easy and smooth when people arrive, everything is all set up. That's why people come. They don't want to make all those arrangements themselves. And this woman said, I'm going to send you a guide. And I was kind of shocked, like I'm not even going to meet the person who's guiding us till I get there. And I was kind of uncomfortable
Yeah.
with that. And we get there, and this woman named Brenda Porter walks in. She's in her 60s. Probably I was in my early 60s then. She comes in. She's a lesbian from Colorado. And she was like the most amazing guy. I mean, just an incredible wilderness guide. When I'm with Brenda, I feel like no matter what emergency ever happened, I'm sure we would be taken care of. Like she's just oozes capability and stuff. And on that trip, every time there was like a little break and people were looking at Machu Picchu or they were doing something, she would pull out this little notebook and a little tiny, like this big, little tiny thing of watercolors. And she would start sketching and doing watercolors, like a 5 minute sketch or a 10-minute sketch. I was so intrigued by that. And her work was beautiful. And she said she's been doing that kind of travel sketching and painting for decades. And then she told me she had taken groups on the Camino de Santiago, and that was on my bucket list because I saw the movie The Way,
Yeah.
and I was like, I really wanted to do the Camino in Spain. And so we dreamed up a trip together where she would teach art and I would teach writing. And so we set that up for 2020. I think I posted it on my website. I think it sold out in 24 hours. It just
Wow.
like people really wanted to come. And then, of course, COVID happened and we had to cancel. And then we set it up again for the following year, went through all the prep, had to cancel it again. So we finally got to do it in, I don't know, a few years ago. And then we did it again. So we've done it twice and we're going to do it again in 2026. And that was just fantastic. It was like 12 or 14 people hiking the Camino, walking across a country. And then we would just stop and Brenda would say, "Now, just look at the light in those trees." I learned to see
Yeah.
differently. I'm not an artist. But I learned to see differently because of Brenda. And I took her classes. I was a total beginner, but I had so much fun because I didn't have any ego investment in painting. So I could just have fun. And I think from her classes, I started studying photography because I really got into the visual of how to see things. We didn't have a lot of writing time on that trip, but we had like I think 4 days where we didn't walk and we just stopped, and we would have a day of just, like, art and writing, and then the next day we'd start hiking again. That was an incredible experience.
What was the feedback from writers on that particular kind of trip? Because that's rather unusual writing retreat.
Well, I think the people who signed up, their primary desire was to hike the Camino de
Okay.
Santiago. Like, they wanted to do the Camino, and the fact that there was gonna be a component of writing and art was a bonus. The description was very clear. This is not for you if you wanna hole up somewhere and write. It was really about wanting to do the Camino in community, in creative community. So, yeah, there were writers there who were, I would say, serious writers, but they were there to do the Camino. They weren't there to
Mhm,
work on their novel.
mhm.
One woman on that trip is a memoirist, and now she's in my one of my classes. Now she's writing a memoir about her hike on the Camino. So it definitely provided material for her, but she wasn't writing it while she was on the Camino.
Yeah, I would imagine that the act of walking and doing so much walking that I would assume that people aren't doing in their back home, they're not doing as much walking, could sort of change the brain in ways that could be really
Yeah.
conducive to writing.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember having done it even twice, I just kept being thrilled, like, "Oh my god, I'm walking across a country." You're walking through farms, and then you're walking in the woods, and then you're walking through cobblestone streets in a little village, and then you're walking through a damn city, and then there's people from all over the world hiking it with you. It's just a really incredible experience, and there were some people on this last trip who were it was a Catholic pilgrimage, and we had, I think, 4 Catholics out of I think there were 12 or 13 people on the trip who were they were really into the churches and that whole aspect of the spiritual part, but I think everyone had a reason they wanted to go on a pilgrimage.
Mhm.
Somebody was retiring, someone had just was grieving a death, someone had gotten a divorce, someone was trying to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of their life. So people had they were in transition of some kind, and I think the idea of that kind of spiritual journey was really appealing to them, and then that we were writing it. We like I said, the days we had off, I would teach like a 3-hour class or something, we would do something more serious, but some of the days I just would hand out, like, these little writing prompts that I prepared out of in a bag, and they would be things that people could be thinking about as they walked, or a little inspiring quote, so I had to get creative about how to bring that
Yeah.
component into that trip, but nobody complained. People loved it because they I think the main thing when you're creating an offering is to be very clear about what it is and what it isn't. So, when I'm teaching a retreat that is not 100% writing focused, I want it to be super clear because you don't want someone coming who expected one thing and gets another
Right,
thing.
right. Yeah, that'd be the bad apple trying to spoil the bunch possibly in there.
Right.
So when you put these together, are you pre-screening the people who are coming? Has there been any need? I know you have a very niche audience in general, probably. You have people who already gravitate to you. So do you have that be the sort of screening process of bringing people in? Or do you feel like you need to do more than that?
It depends on the retreat, actually. For, like, the work weekends that I've done, I don't have any criteria. There people could be beginners, they could be advanced, because everyone's sort of on their own thread. The retreats I did about grief, I had a pretty thorough very thorough screening, actually, because that retreat really was not appropriate for someone who was in the absolute heat of grief, because I'm not a therapist, and it is therapeutic, but And I think I create a very safe container, but I'm not a therapist, so it's not a therapy retreat. So yeah, I would try to screen out people who I felt like they would maybe be overstimulated by hearing everybody else's
Right.
stories, or that they would be served more in a one-on-one therapeutic relationship. But that doesn't happen very much. And usually it means I would have a conversation with the person, and as I describe what actually will happen, usually they're the ones who said, I don't think this is the right fit
Yep.
for me.
Yep.
That's the goal. You don't want to tell someone they can't come. And for like the Camino, we had to physically screen people. I mean, someone had to be capable of hiking. And we had these Zoom calls ahead of time where we talked about training. We gave people training guidelines. We talked about what boots to get. We talked about gear, all of that. And people were in good shape when they came. On that trip, we had a van that would take our luggage. I mean, this was a little bit cushy of a Camino trip because the van would pick up our luggage in the morning, take it to the next hotel. So all you had to carry was a day pack with what you needed for the day. And that van would meet us at a designated spot, like at lunchtime. And if you had a blister or you were too tired or you couldn't make it, it was a really long hiking day, you could hop on the van and get a ride. So I wouldn't call it a forced march. And I've told a lot of people this. When you're on the Camino, you get up, you walk, and then there's like a restaurant right on the Camino,
Right.
and you stop and you get a cappuccino and go to the bathroom. And then you walk some more, and then we stop and we write for 20 minutes, and then we stop, and then we go to lunch. And so you're walking all day, but there's a lot of resting also, a lot of stopping. And you
Yeah.
walk at your own pace. Sometimes you're walking with part of the group and you're singing. Sometimes you want to walk alone for the whole day and just be silent. And so sometimes you're up front, sometimes you're going much slower, sometimes you're stopping and taking a lot of pictures. We'll always have like a guide in the front and a guide in the back, which we call the sweep, to make sure nobody gets lost. And then people would get like on WhatsApp, we had a little WhatsApp group, they'd get a little that day's mileage and where the stops were so they could find them. And the Camino's super well marked. I think it'd be very hard to get lost on the Camino.
So generally, does it seem that people self-screen pretty well for the retreats that they sign up for, as long
Yeah,
as
I mean, I think
you're clear?
it's very unusual that I have to decide that someone isn't the right fit for
Mhm.
something. I mean, it's rare. Yeah, I think people self-screen really well. And I think that comes from, I think when you put these kind of things out, you want to describe it accurately. I'm a tiny little tour company. Some of the big companies like Rhodes Scholar and things like that, they have a whole like ranking system. This is a number one trip, a number two, and that has to do with the level of physical activity. I'm just not doing enough to have those kind of systems in
Mhm.
place. Yeah, and I make everybody get travel insurance. That's a requirement. So that if they break their leg or somebody dies in their family or something, that they'll be covered and I'll be covered.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Before we go, is there anything that you wanted to share with people about perhaps choosing a writing retreat for themselves?
Yeah, I think it's what I'm describing such a wide range.
Right.
And there's retreats that are super focused on like publishing and writing queries or how to get your manuscript ready for publication. That would not be one I would be teaching, but there's just an incredible range. And I think it's what are you looking for? I think a lot of people come on my retreats, especially the ones that are out of the country, and their motto might as well be, while I still can. I
Right.
tend to have women, mostly women. I've had men on my trips, but it's usually like 80% women between probably 45 and 80. So I think for a lot of people, it's like, okay, I could do this. And for some people, they're retired, they have the time. So yeah, I think about what are you looking for? Are you looking for an environment to really focus on writing your book, more like a residency, where you're just going to have the conditions where you could deeply focus on writing and only writing? Or are you looking for an adventure? Are you looking for international travel that's where all the details are going to be taken care of someone else and you're going to get to write? Are you wanting to deal with your aging or are you dealing with a loss and you want a place to process it? It really depends what you want. And at different points in your life, you might want different things.
Yeah.
I've gone to probably all those kinds of retreats myself. I mean, I don't just like teaching them, I love going to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Think about what it is you're looking for and make sure what you're choosing is a good match for what you're wanting.
I think that's great advice. The only people I've ever heard complain about a writing retreat were those where they signed up and they went without enough information about
Right.
what was going to happen. So, what they got might have been a perfectly wonderful retreat for someone else or for them at a different time, but it
Hmm.
wasn't what they expected and it wasn't what they thought they were signing up for. So, they've spent the whole trip sort of trying to reposition themselves in their expectations. And so I think that's really great advice.
I mean, I think the other thing that I would say is make sure if you're going on one of my trips, make sure you're okay traveling with a group. I had someone come once who was like, she discovered she really didn't like being around a group of people. She wanted to do her own thing. It's like, well, why did you come on this trip? Why didn't you do your own thing? So I would say if you want a group experience, have a group experience. If you want to make all your own arrangements and you really want to be completely free, then don't be on a group trip. Or I've had a lot of people who are traveling for a longer period of time. They come to my retreat and then they take off and they're doing something else, their own thing. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today and discussing retreats. And again, thank you so much for offering retreats because one of yours has made a huge difference in my life. So thank you. And I hope to speak to you again soon.
Okay, Rochelle,
All
so
right.
good to see you.
Thank you. Bye.
You can learn more about Laura Davis's upcoming retreats at lauradavis.net. And if you'd like a weekly dose of writing insight and mindset and marketing tips in your inbox, subscribe to the Write Anyway newsletter at pagesandplatforms.com/subscribe. And that's it for this episode of the Write Anyway podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.